views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Open, the one and only show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world right to you. I'm your host, Daren, Jaime. Today we're going to update you on what's happening in and around our borough as well as across New York City. Coming up on today's show, we'll talk about homelessness, the crisis in New York City, how it's affecting millennials and their mental health. Then we'll also speak about the upcoming presidential election and how the current political and social climate can actually affect it. And then later on, we'll learn about a youth-led Bronx-based organization focusing on design thinking and solving business challenges. And then also we'll discuss a Bronx-based program that's actually focused on redefining youth mentoring. So stay tuned because all this and much more is heading your way. Right now, we're officially open. And hello, everyone, and welcome to Open. It is Wednesday, September the 2nd. It's hard to actually believe that we're actually in September already, but September, here it is, September 2nd. And you're watching Open, the live and interactive program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to you. We also want to welcome our viewers that are watching on Manhattan Neighborhood Network as Open is being broadcast live simultaneously on the Eminence channel. We encourage you also to stay connected to us on all of our social media sites at BronxNet TV. Well, a lot has certainly been going on through the past week. We'll take you through a few things with our Bronx updates. The New York Civil Liberties Union filed a lawsuit against the New York City Police Department, forcing the disclosure of information about the NYPD's presence in schools and the impact of school policing on students because of the use of metal detectors. Our BronxNet reporter, Darissa White, brings us the story.
Black Lives Matter protests have continued throughout the summer, which has put a spotlight on policing throughout the country. Including policing in city schools. Recently, the New York City Civil Liberties Union filed a lawsuit against the NYPD to force the department to disclose information surrounding the NYPD's presence in schools and the use of metal detectors.
This week, we sued the NYPD because they have refused to disclose what should be publicly available information about the way that they use metal detectors in New York City public schools.
Joanna Miller, a director at the NYCLU, says that the use of metal detectors in schools aren't necessary and have racial implications.
The metal detectors really have nothing to do with actually keeping kids safe, but they're actually in Black and brown neighborhoods where Black and brown kids have to be subjected to the worst kind of policing every day. But we know that without transparency, we can't even fight it.
The NYCLU says the main components of the lawsuit is to get the NYPD to comply with the Freedom of Information Act, requests that the organization filed months ago, and to adhere to local laws, such as the Student Safety Act, which states the NYPD is required to report metal detector use.
We're very skeptical of the NYPD's claims that producing a list of that information would somehow make the schools less safe.
Miller claims that 2/3 of dangerous items are not found at the metal detector, and the key to safe schools are reforming school safety practices. Reporting for BronxNet, Darissa White.
Thank you, Darissa. In other news, students, teachers, and alumni from the Bronx Design and Construction Academy held a rally against the proposed shutdown of a plumbing career training program. Our BronxNet reporter, Sanji Lopez, was on the scene, and she brings us the details right now.
Holding signs reading "Keep the Trades at BXDCA" and "Don't Phase My Future Out," students, alumni, and teachers from the Bronx Design and Construction Academy held a rally against the proposed shutdown of the plumbing career training program at Alfred E. Smith High School in the South Bronx.
Once this program goes, it won't come back. This school's been here since the 1920s, and they've always had trades. And the plumbing program has had a 10-year stretch of being #1 in New York State as far as Skills USA. South Bronx has a lot of hardworking people, but unfortunately, economically, the South Bronx is one of the poorest congressional districts in the entire country. So that being said, we want to make sure that the only way out of that is to give them training that they need so they can learn the trade, go out and work hard, and get paid.
In 2010, the New York City Department of Education planned to close the Career and Technical Education campus, but the plan was canceled following strong protests from the community. Thus, the Bronx Design and Construction Academy was created to save those programs, providing invaluable career training for underserved South Bronx youth.
There was a mass effort to get rid of the trades in all the boroughs around the country because they believed that the trades did not bring that much value. The college experience was the way to go.
Why are we getting rid of our trades? Why are we hurting our community? We cannot afford to take away from this community. Too much has already been taken away. We're already born into poverty. We don't need anybody else coming in here and taking our resources away.
The opportunities that I got from this school allowed me to be able to better assist my family, especially during these trying times.
Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams and Assemblymember Natalia Fernandez joined the rally, sharing their support in sustaining these programs.
I will stand with you every step of the way because we cannot lose these schools. Not everybody is cut out to be the A+ scientists out there. We are real working people that can do real jobs that are very much needed.
Coronavirus had a disproportionate impact on black and brown people. Closing a program like this, you are adding to that disproportionate impact. You're preventing them from having accessibility to the gainful employment that this city needs.
I'm pretty sure that there's going to be kids in the future that are going to want to pursue this career. That's going to be in the South Bronx. And if we get rid of these trades, how else are they going to do it?
Reporting for BronxNet, Sanji Lopez.
And thank you, Sanji. That's all the time we have for our Bronx updates, but we want you to stay with us because Open will continue with more coming up after this.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community, and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
And welcome back. With the presidential election just months away, there are several concerns about the current political climate in the United States with the increased level of police brutality, as well as protesting and civil unrest. The question is, can this current climate affect the 2020 presidential race? Joining us now to weigh in and provide some further insight is the associate editorial page editor of the New York Post, Michael Benjamin. And Mike, good to have you.
Thank you. Good to be on.
Let's talk about this here as we talk. As we got Kenosha, Wisconsin, the latest with the Jacob Blake shooting. We've got the NBA and all sports teams rising up in protest and defiance. We talk about the area of the political climate and 2020's presidential race. How do you see the current political climate playing out amidst all of this?
I think it's going to play out with a great deal of voter interest. I think you look at voters on both sides, Trump supporters of Biden, Harris coming out and being active and trying to win in those states where they believe they need to win in order to either keep their guy in or to elect Biden and Harris to the White House. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of political organizing. Yes, there's violence in some cities over police brutality and the killings of unarmed black men. but it's also, causing people to become more self-aware, to speak out, as we're seeing among those athletes, whether it's in basketball, football, hockey, and other sports, taking a stand and saying what they believe in. And you had the ball players in Milwaukee walking away from their game in protest of what happened in Kenosha, and then the others following suit, taking a time out and saying, "Look, this is getting worse. We got to say something. We got to stop it. We got to make people think about it, and hopefully come to the right decision when it comes to police accountability and it comes to the rhetoric coming out of the White House."
Talk to us about Kenosha, Wisconsin for a minute. Let's go back for a moment. Obviously, you got the sheriff out there. Now the talk was that they were asking the sheriff to actually deputize citizens and put them out there as deputized citizens to protect and serve, if you will. And then, of course, the gunman, one of those that actually asked for that. I think something that's not being talked about is this young man was 17 years old, but yet and still the age in which a person is supposed to carry a firearm is 18.
Yes, I was surprised, shocked at that too. And the very fact the video showed that after he shot someone, shot three people, and killed two, he's walking down the middle of a road with his rifle slung over his shoulder and his arms raised, saying, "I shot someone," and police vehicles are driving past an armed man. That I found to be shocking as well. And then learning that he's a teenager, he's 17 years old. He went home, and then they were able to extradite him from, I believe, Indiana back to Kenosha, Wisconsin. And now his lawyer is saying that he was trying to defend himself. Well, the kid was running. He fell down. He turned around and he shot people point blank range. I don't know what more evidence you need for a crime having been committed by somebody who shouldn't even have had a firearm as a teenager and using it that way. I give credit to that county sheriff who refused to deputize the militiamen who said they wanted to help defend businesses. Well, that's his job, and he's tried to do his job, and he knew he didn't want to put yahoos with guns out on the street trying to enforce the law and resulting in fatalities, as this young man did, unfortunately. Hopefully, he'll pay for his crime.
Yeah, let's move a little bit and talk about this particular incident. It definitely became a hotbed topic amongst those who are running for office right now. Let's talk a little bit about the Democratic side. Joe Biden has already selected Senator Kamala Harris to be his running mate in a vice presidential election. I don't think, looking back as a historian, you can fill me in, but in my history, I've never heard about a vice presidential race being so, or a vice presidential pick being so powerful and all eyes on as what we saw with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Well, yeah. Well, we do know that the first woman picked for vice president was Geraldine Ferraro, a congresswoman out of Queens, New York, when she ran with the Democratic candidate for president in 1984 against Ronald Reagan. Hers carried some level of controversy, some level of notoriety. This one is important this time because run against Trump and Pence. The president has really got out of his way to try to inflame things. And we talk about Kenosha, militiamen wanting to be deputized to protect property. It's because the president said, the Second Amendment, people have to come together and help our cities. He's partially responsible for the things that have gone on and encouraging it. And I don't understand why he does it and how he gets away with it. I mean, presidents are supposed to be voices of calm and reason, and this president refuses to do that. He refuses to play by the rules of normalcy. He wants to instigate as his way of riling up his base. And when you do that, it can lead to, as we've seen in Kenosha, deaths of innocent people who were unarmed themselves. I mean, that's problematic, and the president's taking no responsibility for it. He's just trying to gin things up, going up against Democrats, saying, they're all socialists. They want to come to your neighborhood. They want to ruin your suburbs. They want to bring disorder and crime. And I'm the guy who's going to stop it. Well, the president has no real authority when it comes to the management of states and cities. It's all in the 10th Amendment. It's not in the Constitution for the president. Then he has no real business being involved. And yes, National Guard chiefs may have been called out by a state governor. Additional forces would require the president to sign off on it. And as far as I know, that really had not happened, but he's taking credit for it.
As always. Anyway, let's go here. Talk to me a little bit about this particular situation here. We're dealing with mail-in ballots as a huge possible game changer in the upcoming November election. We know that the president has appointed someone over the Postal Service that was a huge donor to his campaign. Yet and still, on the hearts and minds of many Americans, where exactly mail-in ballots will fall in the final decision-making process in this 2020 presidential election. Give me your thoughts on what we could potentially see happening here.
Well, you have a lot of mail-in because of the COVID-19 crisis. A lot of states want to go that way because a lot of voters may not feel comfortable or feel safe going to a polling place with hundreds of other people and not wanting to risk their health. So, states have instituted some level of mail-in balloting, whether you want to call absentee balloting. A couple of states, Washington State in particular, has had an all mail-in system for the last several years that has occurred without incident. The president is trying to gin up resistance to the mail-in ballots by claiming it's going to be a potential fraud. That hasn't been the case. There are no documented cases of legitimate, documented, coordinated fraud that has turned an election. I mean, we've had here in the city a couple of people who tried to and have been, charged with and convicted of balloting fraud. We had at least 2 cases in the Bronx where that happened. But it wasn't widespread, and it was basically minor violations of the election law because they were carrying more. They delivered more than what the law says they can deliver of ballots to the Board of Elections. Yes, maybe 1 or 2 ballots we believe may have been tampered with or may have been forged, but it wasn't wide scale enough to even affect the outcome of that particular election that we're talking about here. The president thinks it'll be a major fraud. That's not going to happen. The states have responsibilities for the elections, and they're putting in safeguards to make sure nothing happens in that regard. People have a right to vote, and the more you can create better access to people in a time of coronavirus and pandemic, the more you get participation. I think it's very hard to have a national program of mail-in ballot fraud that would not be discovered prior to Election Day. So the president is just blowing a lot of heat, a lot of steam, because he wants to excite his base and say they're going to take away this election. And if he loses, he wants to be able to have some sort of legitimate reason to say, well, I'm not going to recognize the outcome. That's crazy. That's not going to happen in the United States. Yes, mail-in ballots will be delayed when it comes to getting the instant results. Everybody's used to the results being on election night. But even those results have never been and are never official until they've been certified, either depending on the states, the state Board of Elections, or the Secretary of State for a state who certifies elections. Most important date is to have elections certified by December, I believe it's December 9th this year. That's when the Electoral College meets in all the states to cast their votes for the President of the United States. And the person who wins the Electoral College vote becomes the president, not necessarily the popular vote. As you learned in 2016, when President Trump basically won the Electoral College despite losing the popular vote by several million votes. That may happen again this year, or the Democrats may be able to hold on and win in the swing states. I know that's important to you and our viewers, is what's going to happen in the election. New York is a given. It's going to go Democratic. It's going to go to Biden-Harris. What's going to happen in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and some other of the swing states, possibly Nevada, what's going to happen there will determine the outcome of the election. So I think Biden and Harris have to focus on winning those places that Hillary should have won 4 years ago, but didn't. That means Wisconsin, Michigan. They've got to make sure that they get the vote out, Democratic vote out, and win that state to win the Electoral College vote, so they can win come December 9th in the real election with the Electoral College.
Are the Democrats making enough noise other than being anti-Trump? I think that's the question that a lot of people are asking right now. Is the message
early though? It's still early. The Republican convention just ended. We're trying to get out of this whole coronavirus pandemic mindset where people feel comfortable talking about stuff. We've had these unrests in cities over police brutality, police shootings. And so, people are concerned, and the Democrats are going to come together, figure out what their focus is going to be. Is it going to be exclusively on the pandemic and the economy? Is it going to be on police brutality and the president's policies and his what some would say his racism, his anti-immigrant stance, the things that have made America a very difficult place to be if you're a minority or an immigrant these last 4 years? And also looking at, how do we handle our foreign policy? And now the controversy over whether or not, his director of national intelligence is going to be sharing with Congress potential information about potential efforts to undermine the U.S. election by outside forces, whether it be China, or Russia, or Iran, right, or another hostile nation. They don't want to share information with members of Congress, which is a legal requirement. So lot's going to be going on. But to answer your question, I think Biden and Harris are going to come up with at least 3 or 4 issues that they can focus on over these next few months towards Election Day to keep American voters and their voters involved, to try to win those states that they need to win. That would put us back on the right track. I think it's the economy. It's the president's poor response to the coronavirus. It's the social and political unrest in many of our cities, particularly cities where you've seen police brutality and the killing of unarmed Black men. I think those are the issues that I think that those two can focus on and talk about, and what their policies would be and how would be better for the nation than what we're presently undergoing now.
All right, Michael Benjamin, we got to leave it there. Thanks a lot, brother, for joining us here on the show. Of course, you can always catch Michael Benjamin, Associate Editorial Page Editor of the New York Post. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
And by the way, great hat that you're wearing. Because of that, we'll have you back.
Go Orange.
All right. Michael Benjamin right here. We'll be back with more Open. Come right back right after this.
It looks bleak. It feels bleak. But the city isn't shut down because our public services keep working. In spite of, and in the face of, the dangers, we can count on them. And to keep them working and funded, now and in the future, we need to be counted. Self-respond now to the 2020 census at my2020census.gov.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
And thank you for staying with us. With the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, homelessness continues to impact the country as a whole. Each generation has an actual legacy that promotes an understanding of why they live the way that they do. There are social barriers that are influencing each and every generation, such as the housing market, financial stability, as well as mental health. Despite efforts being made by the city to address homelessness, it continues to be a problem. Here now to talk more about this is the program director of a family homeless shelter, and she's also the founder of I Am She, Dr. Xellex Rivera. And Dr. Rivera, good to have you.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining us. And listen, let's get right at it. When we talk about the issue of homelessness, I don't think that many times people will make the correlation between millennials and homelessness, but yet and still, that's real.
Yes, it's actually really real. Homelessness plagues all ages, but a lot of our research does not connect to the millennial homelessness. Millennials tend to shy away from some of the traditions of life, such as getting married, having children. They're staying in their parents' house longer. And if they don't stay there, then they end up in shelter. So it's a very unique population. And it's actually more privy on the family side that you'll see a lot of single mothers who are millennial age. And then on the single side, it's a lot of millennial males that tend to be in our shelter systems that are coming in large numbers.
And when we look at these numbers, I mean, is there any reason that we're actually seeing these numbers? Is it unemployment? Is it, I mean, what are the things that are actually forcing homelessness? Is it New York City being, too rent heavy? How does it work?
It's a few different factors. One of the main things happens to be the cost of living in New York City. We are the highest undergrad educated generation, so therefore we have a lot of college debt at a very early age. So when you combine college debt with the fact that you can't find a job that might give you the income that you need to survive in New York City, aligned with the cost of living in New York City, you tend to hit a hurdle where you might not be able to survive. But on the flip side of that, we're also the generation of entrepreneurship. So we tend to want to go into these businesses. We're not really loyal to corporations. So therefore you end up having more entrepreneurs. And then while you're trying to struggle, hustle and bustle, which is the New York way, you really can't afford to live in this city. So it gets kind of tricky actually for them as they try to cope with adulthood and just getting older.
What about length of stay? When you talk about homelessness, there is this length of stay component that comes along with it. Are we talking about a short-term length of stay, long-term length of stay in the area of homelessness?
It depends. So in New York City shelter, once you've hit the 6 or 9 month mark, you are then a long-term stayer. So for the most part, when you go into the shelter system, you'll see that they are long-term stayers. So they tend to be in shelter for an extended period of time.
And we know that mental health is also something that a lot of people have to deal with concerning the mental health, I should say the homelessness crisis. Mental health and homelessness go hand in hand. It's synonymous sometimes. And many people don't correlate homelessness and mental health. But give us a little bit of a background as to what you're finding when it comes to the homeless population and mental health.
Mental health is kind of broad across the homeless population. And that can be related to the trauma that's experienced, or it could have been pre-diagnosed beforehand. So as many might know, coming into the homeless shelters is traumatic in itself, let alone whatever happened to you prior to coming into shelter, which can also lead to some type of depression or PTSD there. As we talk about severe mental illness, a lot of times it is connected to what gets people into shelter. The problem or the hiccup there is that the services are limited.
Talk to us about COVID-19. We also know that the moratorium on evictions is soon coming to an end. We're expecting a lot of people to actually hit. Talk to us about what we're expecting.
So a lot of our shelters, again, especially on the single side, I keep highlighting the single side because they live in a dormitory type setting. It is not very likely that you'll find a single shelter that they have like their own rooms and their own living spaces. So COVID would have impacted those areas a little harder, or those shelters a little harder. And I know that a lot of agencies throughout New York City put a lot of cleaning precautions into place, as well as attempt to make sure that people are not going in and out. There was a lot of, there was hazard pay in New York City, which was wonderful, that helped the shelters be able to navigate through COVID. However, COVID still hit. So like, for example, on the family side, we did a lot of cleaning. We did a lot of making sure that everybody was masked every week to try to prevent the spread of COVID. However, because everything was shut down and paused, we have a lot more families who are then unemployed. You have a lot more families now that have to do homeschooling for their children that they've never done in very small spaces. So it was a very unique time. However, like you said, once the eviction forbearance or forgiveness is over, there's a lot of people that might end up in shelter because they might not have been preparing themselves. Hopefully Home Base, which is in New York City, which prevents homelessness, can assist them before coming into the homeless shelter. However, I can predict or see that a lot of people would end up in shelter once the financial forgiveness programs and things like that are lifted.
And then we talk about another problem, right? Because if you have this homeless population and schools about to get started, for those single parents to possibly have, children, the use of a laptop, having necessary laptop. We know that, virtual training is going on. Another set of problems. Talk to us about the issues that you have to mediate through when you're dealing with families such as this.
I mean, when you think about it, it's 1.1 million kids in New York City who are in the public school system. And believe it or not, half of that population is in the shelters. So you have to look at when it first hit, it was a little harder because a lot of our shelters are not equipped with Wi-Fi or bandwidth for the entire building or for the clients. A lot of them did not have computers when they entered the shelter. So at first, it was about creating community spaces or computers where kids can come to. And then later on, New York City did eventually give these children iPads, and then most agencies had to just provide Wi-Fi. That is what we did on my side at Urban Resource Institute. We did that as it relates to making sure that the children had the things that they needed to navigate through school. However, the catch-22 to the whole thing is that while they did have the resources such as an iPad, a lot of kids are not necessarily technology savvy as it relates to learning, but it doesn't mean that they can't take in the information. Some people learn based on a teacher in a classroom being able to assist them. So I've had a couple students that had a hard end of the year because now everything is on Zoom or everything is in Google Classroom, but they really wanted to be in school. In addition to that, the meals that come with going to school, the recreation that comes with going to school, the socialization that comes with going to school is now ultra limited in the shelter system. We don't have enough space to try to accommodate recreation. We had to put in certain policies that only maybe 1 or 2 children can be in recreation at the time if it was open, because eventually the city started to close the recreations that we have in our family shelters. So it kind of was an up and down spiral. Now, in preparation for the next school year, I know that they are being offered different options as it relates to maybe 1 week on, 1 week remote, or 100% on. That gets really tricky when you're trying to monitor families and their children, because now when they're going, and we're talking about younger age children who don't understand this whole COVID thing. So as much as you want to prepare your children for don't touch any surfaces, don't do this. Once they get into school, they don't have the same acknowledgement.
Discipline, right?
The fact that it's COVID, they want to see their friends. And then that gets more tricky to now you have to put more precautions in place to when they come back into the shelter. How would that look? Will we have to take temperatures? Will they have to wear gloves when they come through public areas? Will they have to be masked up continuously? And how we're going to navigate that with younger ages. Now that impacts the families in shelter because a lot of them, for the most part, are single mothers. And they're trying to, again, navigate getting out of the shelter system. And some of our programs in New York City require you to have some type of employment. And unless you found employment that does allow you to work from home, therefore you would have to go into places that are open, like, a restaurant or anything like that. However, you can't do that if you don't have childcare. So again, the shelter does not necessarily provide childcare. And now schools being open, it gives a parent, they're in between a rock and a hard place as it relates to, do I just, put my kid at risk of going to school and this whole COVID thing having a second wave because I need to work? Or do I homeschool my kid and just try to navigate through shelter and it'll just prolong my stay even worse? So again, it's a really tough situation for mothers, especially in shelter, or single parents in shelter altogether.
So tell me, before we go, do you see things getting better or worse when it comes to homelessness here in New York?
Right now, because of COVID, it's going to get a little worse. A lot is happening. Both financially for people that are living in the community as well as in shelter. I can see it getting worse. But at the same time, I do believe that, Governor Cuomo did certain things that would make sure that people, if they plan properly, would be able to stay in their housing. And then even if the financial forgiveness lifts, they should be able to stay where they were. It's amazing because COVID kind of gave everybody this empathy spell where everybody's kind of communal and they can get along. So right now, New York City is like one big hug almost, because they're kind of working with you as it relates to staying in your house and how to pay rent, things of that nature. But once everybody goes back to normal, I definitely can see an increase in homelessness, especially amongst the millennial population as a whole.
All right, Dr. Xellex Rivera, that's our way of saying the honeymoon will soon be over. Dr. Rivera, thank you so much for joining us here on Open. Listen, I want you to stay with us. We do have more Open. We're going to come back with more show. We'll be right back right after this. welcome back. The Thinkubator is a youth-led Bronx-based organization focusing on training, educating, and connecting Bronx youth to work-based learning experiences, employment, as well as educational opportunities. Youth are connected to businesses, not-for-profits, elected officials, and government to partake in our U.S. democracy and impact change. And here now to share a little bit more about it is the founder and CEO of the Thinkubator, Eddie Summers. And Eddie, good to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. And talking about a level of involvement, when you talk about our young people today, to get them connected in these kinds of ways, when you talk specifically, about work-based learning experiences and having that experience, give us a little bit about what was behind the mind of the Thinkubator.
Sure. No, thank you for being here again. As I said, the Thinkubator formed out of work with the Bronx Borough President, a nonprofit organization called Here to Here, Dream Yard, and about 20 employers. So in 2018, that group got together and wanted to really focus on youth talent development and really bring power to youth voices. So in 2018, they decided to form what's called the Bronx Private Industry Council, the Bronx PIC, otherwise known as, where they started to provide opportunities during 2018 and 2019 to young people in the Bronx. Then 2020, of course, COVID hits. And at the time, I was the executive director of the Bronx PIC. And COVID hits, and we're like, I don't know if this is going to be sustainable. So we quickly transitioned the Private Industry Council from the Private Industry Council to a food relief organization focused on how do young people in our organization help with food insecurities during COVID-19. And then shortly after, we formed the Thinkubator, which is, what I see as a very critical organization to really bring power to youth voices in the Bronx and to give them these work-based learning experiences through internships, jobs, and connecting them to educational experiences as well. So we've had, about a 2-year period where we've been focused on working with the BP and employers, and then we flipped the model to really empowering youth and really making sure that youth leads at the center of all the work that we do.
Yeah, I know one of the pillars that you talk about is actually the Thinkubator solves. And so part of that is really solving some issues. Talk about the solving component.
Sure. So we have a variety of different programs. So the Solves is one program that's of about 4 programs that we've developed in such a short time. So Solves is our design thinking program that really focuses on giving young people an issue or challenge and partnering them with businesses or nonprofit organizations and letting them hack that challenge and letting them think beyond the walls. Oftentimes, we as adults and professionals think so institutional, right? We are formally educated. So we come at problem solving from those lenses. Well, youth don't have that, right? And so what we do with our Thinkubator Solves is allow young people to just hack issues and really think about those issues from their experiences or their inexperiences. And so over the last year, we've done about 6 Thinkubator Solves challenges. One with Great Performances, which is a catering company in the Bronx, to Spring Bank, which focuses on how you bank the unbanked population, which we have a large population here in the Bronx who are unbanked, to this summer where we had 3 really interesting challenges really around contemporary issues. We worked with Misha Ross Porter on school culture and how, as we are approaching young people going back to school, how to think about youth culture, school culture, how young people can think about the challenges that they're going to face with COVID in mind and with the combination of being remote and not remote. So the young people were able to give Dr. Ross Porter some great suggestions and advice about how to think about school culture as we enter back into the fall semester. Another challenge was thinking about school safety. As we know, one of the major contemporary challenges that we've been facing in society is about policing in America. And we know a lot of our schools in New York have had the presence of police and metal detectors and such. And so young people work with legal aid and advocates for children and think about solutions to school safety and how can you create a safe, welcoming environment in light of not having police there or the presence of police officers there. Another challenge that the young people faced was a partnership with Rosa Garcia, who's the owner of Mott Haven Bar and Grill, also has a Create Cafe and Agency 31 that she has. So she's serial entrepreneur, a great person, a great Bronxite. And young people worked with Rosa on thinking about how can restaurants be successful in the age of COVID. In particular, what Rosa's issues is she's sort of in a desolate area. There's a lot happening there in terms of development, but how does a restaurant be successful with being in COVID, being outdoors, where fall is coming soon, we often have rain and colder weathers and temperatures. How can the restaurant be successful? So the young people were at the core of helping these businesses and these public agencies solve these issues. One of the other things that we're doing outside of Thinkubator Solves is our youth council. This fall, we're launching a youth council where former participants from our Thinkubator programs, our Bronx Private Industry programs, our Here to Here network schools, and DreamYard alumni will get together. About a group of 10 of them, we're going to coalesce and really allow them to form their own agenda. What do I mean by that? They will form their own agenda in terms of issues that impact young people. So one, they'll help us run and govern our organization, but then two, they'll think about some of the issues, whether it's public parks, whether it's schools, whether it's workforce issues, whether it's, thinking about access to technology and Wi-Fi. These young people will be at the core of thinking about what are the issues for Bronx youth that are impacted by in Bronx youth, and how do we form an agenda around this, and how do we advocate and educate about these issues and have a youth lens. Another one major issue that we're thinking about that's critically important that young people are often out of the conversation is reimagining a Bronx economy. We just had a conversation with the Center for New York City Affairs hosted at the New School, where they have a whole series on reimagining New York. And we figured, let's connect with them. Let's think about how young people can reimagine a Bronx economy and lead from a youth perspective. Because too often, I have a background, I have a PhD in public policy focused on economic development. Too often, again, we think institutional. And I immediately, when I started to think about the challenges that COVID posed to us, and I thought about how do we revive our Bronx economy, I thought to my training back at the New School when I was getting my PhD, thinking about economic policy. But instead, we want to flip this. We really want young people to think about, what does a new Bronx economy look like? What are those aspects of economy that you want represented, that you would visit, that you would engage with, that you would work at, and that you would consume?
And what are you hearing? And what are you hearing actually when it comes from the voices of young people? Because obviously, as you said, there are sometimes the voices that are always overlooked, and so we know that they bring a lot to the table. And really, when we think about social change right now, they are the catalyst for the social change that we're seeing. So, what are you hearing from young people in this area?
Absolutely. So what we're hearing right now, and we're going to launch this youth council and this reimagine the Bronx economy in the fall. But what we're hearing is one of the big things that have stuck with me over this last year. A young person said to me was that, the Bronx is a beautiful place. We have great people here, and we deserve to be heard. I think what's most important is that they want to be heard, and they want their perspectives. The young people are very shocking. They have a perspective on everything, of course. And so they just want to be heard. So we are actually going to launch this conversations with the young people with this youth council this fall. But preliminarily, as I spoke to young people this summer, talking about the economy, quite frankly, the young people are like, why don't we have things that were in Manhattan? Why don't we have, for instance, like, a yogurt shop in the Bronx, where, Candle 16 is all over Manhattan, but we don't really have fresh yogurt places in the Bronx that we can go to. And these youth, when I was talking to them, were specifically talking about the South Bronx, but more fundamentally, what they were saying was, why don't we evaluate what are the assets that other communities have that we don't have, that we're deficient in, and why don't we have some of those assets? Because we do purchase those items when we go to Manhattan and other locations, but we don't have it in the Bronx, and we would be willing to purchase it. So what's fundamental to that argument is that, like, really thinking fundamentally about what are the aspects of, like, for instance, a Manhattan economy that's made it so successful, and what's lacking in the Bronx, and why can't we bring those things here? Because we do have purchasing power. So that's fundamental of what the youth were trying to express to me. So I'm very much, and my team is very much looking forward to engaging over the next year in conversations about, again, outside of retail and outside of a Candle 16, what are those other aspects of an economy that you're looking for? What are those other things that you want to consume, And so one of the big things in the Bronx is we're finally going to see our first, particularly in the South Bronx, our first 100% commercially built building. Now, with COVID-19, I don't know if that's going to continue, but we started to see some activity prior to COVID-19, and I'm hoping that still, some of those activities still exist and happens. And so I'm looking forward to that. Another area that hopefully that we'll start to discuss as we think about the economy as well is the hospitality sector, for instance, that was starting to grow really big. Who knows what's going to happen with that? Number of hotels was sparking up in the Bronx. I'm not too sure what's going to happen. We started to see an emergence in the creative economy, which Rosa Garcia is in a new building called the Create Building, which is a hub of creative individuals. So I'm very much looking forward to first of all, we heard a lot from the summer, but looking forward to having very directed conversations with young people about what do they imagine the Bronx economy to be? What do they see for themselves? What is the future that they want? And what is it that they want to see here in the Bronx? So very much looking forward to it.
Before we go, please tell people, how can young people actually get connected and be a part? If they want to be a part of this Thinkubator, what do they do?
Sure. So we are a newly formed nonprofit. We just got our status this summer, which I'm very excited about. You can go to www.thethinkubator.org. We have a pretty comprehensive website, but we have a page on there about what we do. And then you can go to what we do, see some videos of what we do, and then you can go specifically to the tab on young people. And then there is a form that you fill out. And then one of my team members will come and engage you. So we're very excited for Bronx youth. We really want to make sure that we amplify and empower the voices of Bronx young people.
All righty, Eddie Summers, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us, talking about the Thinkubator. And if you want more information, all you got to do is go to thethinkubator.org. Want you to stay with us. We do have more open coming up. We'll be right back right after this.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
And thank you for staying with us. The Arthur Project is a not-for-profit organization building economic and social mobility for at-risk youth through unprecedented levels of intensive professional mentoring, as well as project-based civic engagement and critical life skills development. Now, the organization takes a unique approach to mentoring, providing full-time trained and supervised mentors to children for the entire duration of their middle school years. And here now to share us a little bit more is the executive director of the Arthur Project, Jessica Greenawalt. And Jessica, good to have you.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you. Well, listen, when we talk about really investing in the lives of young people, that the Arthur Project does, and particularly by way of also mentoring. So share with us a little bit about the work that the Arthur Project does with young people.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I should first start, I guess, by telling you sort of what our organization was inspired by, and that was the real life experience of one of our co-founders, Liz Murray, who was born and raised in the Bronx herself, and who had very loving, caring parents, but parents that were also dealing with some pretty serious mental health and addiction issues, which created a lot of challenges for their family. And through the relationship that Liz had with a loving, caring neighbor, Arthur, and a couple other important adults in her life, she really learned to set high expectations for herself, to meet those expectations, and, ultimately through those relationships to figure out that she really mattered, not only to those people, but to her community and to the world beyond. And so as we began our organization, we really thought about what can we take from that experience that Liz had with Arthur and others and replicate that for other young people in the Bronx. So that was sort of the inspiration for our organization. We actually had our first cohort of students transition into high school just this summer. And I say first cohort because when students join our program, they join at the beginning of 6th grade and they stay through 8th grade. So they receive in-depth, intensive mentoring services from us for 3 full years.
And when you talk about the mentoring program and actually mentoring young people, talk to me about what exactly it means in the life of a young person to receive mentorship.
That's a great question. I think a lot of people, when they hear about mentoring, they think of a traditional type of relationship where there is a volunteer adult in their life and they might spend a couple hours a month together talking and maybe participating in some fun recreational activities. Which is all great. The thing that makes us different at the Arthur Project is that we actually utilize social work students. So graduate students who are in school to become social workers, we utilize them as our mentors. And what that means for the students that they're working with is that really both the adults and the kids get to know each other, get to learn from each other, get to have fun together. And ultimately for the young person, for the middle school student, they get to have a relationship where they can have the space to talk about and process all of the things that are going on for them in their life. And, you know, if you think back to middle school, there's a lot going on, right? There's friends, there's family, there's identity stuff, there's figuring out who you are and where you want to go in life. And the beauty of this type of multi-generational relationship where this adult is really devoting a significant amount of time to the students that they're working with is they really have the time and the space to kind of sort through all those things and to get a really deep level of support in kind of creating their own path in life, you know, thinking really far ahead into the future, or maybe 5 or 10 years, and thinking about who they want to be at that point and how they can get there from where they are now. And that takes place in a few different ways for us at the Arthur Project. One is through individual sessions. So mentors and middle school students meeting together individually to, you know, talk about what's going on in their life and to start to set some goals and work toward those goals. And it also comes through service, so community engagement, civic engagement, you know, students figuring out their power and the places that they can enact their power in their own community. And it also comes through other experiences that they might have with their mentor. So, you know, you can take any seemingly simple experience from, you know, going to a museum, to a cooking class, to a demonstration. And there are so many teachable moments in those experiences. And when you have a trusted adult with you that you're in a close relationship with, and that trusted adult is really able to help that student kind of sort through that experience and connect it to their own trajectory, that's really powerful.
Yeah, you got 2 middle schools that you're actually operating out of, and you got these 2 middle schools. I think you serve about 150 students. Any particular reason that you were targeting these particular schools, and do you plan on looking at some other schools in the future?
That's a great question. So we decided to partner with the 2 middle schools. They are North Bronx School of Empowerment and Leaders of Tomorrow for a couple reasons. The first is really that they are in the Bronx. We love the Bronx. I love the Bronx. I live in the Bronx. Liz is from the Bronx, our other co-founder. So we really wanted to stay close to home and really be a part of impacting our own community through this program. But we also partnered with those schools because the 2 principals of those schools were extremely supportive of what was a very young, new, untested model for a mentoring program. And they gave us the time and the space and the support to really bring it to life. And that was a really important piece for us. And the third reason that we chose to partner with those schools is because the 2 schools that we partner with are considered a community school. Oftentimes community schools have had a number of challenges historically and may need sort of additional supports in order to become a healthy, thriving community. So we knew that that was a place where there would be a large student population that could benefit from our program and our services.
And when we talk about COVID-19, obviously a lot of educational institutions and organizations really impacted. Talk about the impact of COVID-19 and what it meant for the Arthur Project.
Well, as somebody who knows a lot about the Bronx, I'm sure we were really deeply, deeply impacted by COVID in a very real way. And, you know, we'll continue to be impacted by COVID, I imagine, for many years to come. So for us, it shifted our services in a couple ways. One was the shift from being a school and community-based program to being a virtual program for, you know, since March, essentially. And that, of course, brought a whole host of challenges. A lot of the families that we work with didn't have the technology they needed to participate in our services, let alone in school. So a lot of what we devoted our time and energy to was to ensuring that families and students not only had the technology they needed to get connected, but also were getting their basic needs met. I mean, as you can imagine, a lot of people during this time have been struggling with wondering if they're going to be able to put food on the table, or if they're going to be, kicked out of their house for not being able to pay rent. And so a lot of our focus has been about supporting the whole family, really, and ensuring that their basic needs are met, and continuing to provide remote mentoring services that are just between the mentor and the mentee. So our services really changed over the past 6 months or so, and they'll continue to change. The beauty, I think, of our organization being young and small is that we can be pretty agile. We care very deeply about whether or not our program is working for our students and families. And so we're really in constant conversation with them about what's working for them, what isn't. And we're very ready to adapt and be flexible and kind of do whatever's needed to make sure that our kids and families feel supported by us.
Yeah. And so going forward, as we are now into almost the start of the school year, how do you see things playing out, and how do you see things going forward?
Well, it's funny that you asked that. I was just in a meeting just before this with our school principals that we partner with, talking about this exact question. As you know, things, even to this day, things are still
fluid,
up in the air about schools and reopening, and there's a lot of fears and a lot of anxieties. So really what we're anticipating right now is that we're going to be offering hybrid services. We're going to be offering virtual, individual, and group services to students and families that works for. And we're also going to be offering in-person services to families that need that. So we're really ready to be flexible and to meet the individual needs of each of the students and families we work with.
All righty. Well, Jessica Greenawalt, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Now, for people who want more information, what do they do?
Please visit our website, thearthurproject.org.
All righty. Go to thearthurproject.org, and there you can find out more information. Jessica, we want to thank you for coming and being with us here on Open and the great work that's going on at the Arthur Project. And as she said, if you want to get more information, visit their website, arthurproject.org, or you can also follow them on their Facebook page at the Arthur Project. Well, we've come to the end of our show today. We want to thank all of our guests for joining us, and most of all, you, the viewer, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the Recablecast on BronxNet Channel 67. And if you have Verizon Fios, or that would be considered now, Channel 2133, where you can catch the Recablecast on Channel 2133, or anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. For all of us here on the set of Open, I am Daren Jaime saying thank you for watching Open. Take care. God bless. If you want a brand new episode, my girl Rena Valentine will join us on Friday with a brand new episode. So take care. We'll talk to you soon.